So it's one
But
thing to say.
are you done?
I think I like.
Do you think
I think
that's the
so.
standard
Okay.
view? Do you think that's the standard view in Islam? I want to
Tell
understand
me,
it.
because I know
The
his
idea
view.
that men and women have
Cheers.
different rights, is that standard
So
view
I
or
knew-
is that your
so
view?
I know what
Are you
view-
speaking as for Muslims
Right.
as a whole or just for yourself?
So I know what backdrop he was coming from. He was coming from like an atheistic backdrop, even though he's not an
yeah,
atheist.
I'm an atheist too.
You're an atheist too.
Yeah.
Right. So now tell me from that backdrop, what's the question?
I'm just curious what your view is and whether or not you think you represent Islam as a whole. First of
I
all.
don't represent Islam as a whole.
That's the thing. It's tricky, right? Because with Christians,
I think
you can
that's a
say
very-
Catholics
very
have
strange
their view,
question.
They have a lot of different views, but they have the Pope and they have a hierarchy that says this is what we believe. In Islam, there's a lot of different groups and like imams. They have all different views, right? But generally, with men and women, do they have equal rights in your view? That's all I'm asking. Simple question.
Yeah, but before that, you asked me another question, right? Which is that there's some sort of hierarchy and there's some sort of, for example, the Pope will represent all their views.
That's why it makes it easier. It doesn't make it easier with Christians.
Firstly, he
right?
doesn't. He doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't represent all of their
That's a
views.
good point. Because a
Yeah.
lot of Christians have different views as well, right? So
And even amongst Catholics, many of them don't. For example, the Catholic at this moment in time, the Catholic Pope at this moment in time, and his stance towards Muslims and Iran and Palestine, many people are actually saying, you know what, we're distancing
Yeah,
ourselves
sure.
from him.
Yeah.
He does not represent our views, and frankly, he's compromised. Secondly, when it comes to, sorry, you made a point about Islam. So when it comes to Islam, for example, the Quran, whether you're Sunni, Shia, Qadiani, whatever it is, we accept the same Quran. Yeah, we accept Hadith. Yeah, when we pray, we make Qiyam, we go Qiyam in standing. Yeah, we bow, we
you don't all
prostrate.
accept the
So
same
there are very.
interpretations, right?
Sorry.
There's a variety of interpretations and scholarly debate and discussion around
Yes,
what these
but,
meanings
but
are.
I'm
right?
making a distinction here that when it comes to the fundamentals, there's an agreement. But when it comes to the non-fundamentals, and someone can argue that they're fundamentals, obviously to some degree.
So traditional
but one
roles
second,
for
one
men and
second.
women, that's quite fundamental, right?
No. Concept
it
of
not?
God, no. Concept of God, the 5 pillars of Islam, the 6 articles of faith, this does not.
It doesn't address that.
It is not in the 5 pillars of Islam, nor in the 6 articles of faith. Therefore, it's not regarded as, for example, a foundation of faith. It now is something that needs to be addressed sociologically in terms of how we function in a society and our roles within. So that comes under jurisprudence.
What rights do you think men should have that women shouldn't, vice versa? What rights?
What rights do men have that, for example, the right of leading prayer?
Okay, I'm
Women
not
don't
talking,
get to
I'm
lead
not talking
prayer.
about like cultural customs and
Not
religious
cultural
customs,
custom.
or
It's
religious rules. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about
it's an
rights.
article of faith.
I'm talking about rights defended by the state. So like the right to vote, the right to bear arms. Let's say in America they've got the right to carry weapons.
No.
We don't have that right here.
Okay.
I'm talking about stuff that's public, not just within
Right.
the religion.
Let's take a back step, because what you're doing is you're superimposing this notion of voting onto the Islamic framework. So democracy and the Islamic framework, they don't have to be in line, right? So voting.
Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. So for example, you making it seem like voting is a part of Islam, or that Islam needs to fundamentally address that in its core doctrines. Voting is not like, yes, Islam can address jurisprudentially the concept of voting. However, we've got our own system of governance, which is called khilafat.
So that's separate from the state.
No, that is the state, but it's a different form of governance to say democracy.
So it's almost like a government within the bigger government.
No, not at all. It's just not democracy. You don't get the average person, going and voting for said thing. The Khilafat election is different.
So like more broadly speaking, I know like different Islamic countries have totally different rules around what women can and cannot do. It depends on the country, right?
Yeah,
So I've been
depending
to
on the
Middle East,
country
I've
and the
been to
culture.
Jordan. It's very different in Jordan than it is in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely.
Very different, right?
Yeah.
And even Saudi Arabia, I was there 15 years ago. It's totally different now.
Yeah.
Since I last was there, right? In terms of how women are treated, right? I just wanted to know your view. Forget what all the other Muslim countries think or Muslims think. Your view specifically. What rules do you think should apply to men differently to women? Like, what are the rules? Give me an example. Like you
I
said.
gave you one example,
You
like
mentioned leading in
prayer, right?
Okay. Aside from that, another one.
If, for example, Muslim men and women are living in a country and there are scholars that if they accept this notion of voting, then yeah, men and women will vote.
Okay. What about other rules? So about work and like he mentioned work and truck driving and all the rest.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at the situation, right? It's based upon a situation. There's no one size that fits all. So in some kind of society, for example, I gave the example of gynecology, and then I said that based upon that, the Islamic stance is not going to be that women should not be, learning, gynecology and becoming doctors and nurses.
You think they shouldn't? Or they should?
No, I'm saying the exact opposite.
Are you saying they should? I didn't catch that.
Yeah,
Should
yeah.
or shouldn't?
I'm saying that they should because it's needed in society.
Well, that's where somewhere like Iran has changed a lot, right? Iran in the 50s was very different
Right.
in terms of women working. Now I think the workforce is very much kind of 50-50 in Iran. Maybe
Right.
not perfectly 50, but it's quite balanced, right? Islam is able to adapt. The same with Christianity.
So we say when
even
it comes to the workforce,
atheism has adapted, right?
so when it comes
these
to the
roles.
workforce, as and when needed. So when it comes to women, if it's required, if it's needed, okay. If it's not needed, then priority should be given to the making of the home.
Do you think that should be enforced in the public sphere? In the
What do you mean
law?
enforced?
So it's one thing to have a custom that women, let's say women. It used to be a majority opinion in Britain that women should stay with their children until the children start school, right? That was majority opinion, right? Many
Christian
decades.
based or atheist based?
It was just a custom. It was from many decades ago.
Right.
Now it's changed, right? Majority of British people don't believe that. They believe women shouldn't have to stay with their kids until they start school, right?
Right.
Stay at home. Now, you can take you have your beliefs about religion or your spirituality or your home life, but then you do have to think, how does that also impact the public sphere? Making laws, deciding legislation, voting in parliament, all this stuff. How
We
it
believe in a
affects everyone.
theocracy, right?
Well,
Ultimately speaking.
I'm curious to know what you think. Where does it, when you leave the private sphere of your religion in the private world, how does it then manifest in the public sphere? What kind of public sphere would you like to see in this country?
It's a
in the UK?
very broad and
I'm
generic
interested to
question.
know what you think. Yeah,
Hone in,
it is a
give me
big
more
question.
specifics, yeah.
Let's say on the issue of how we raise children, I'll give you an example. Do you think it should be enforced in law that women shouldn't do that, or should they be allowed to? How does that work?
That women shouldn't, should there be a law to say that women shouldn't raise kids?
They should maybe there should be an expectation at the social level.
How
or
would
should
you be able to
enforced
even
law?
enforce
How
that?
How does that work?
I don't even understand the question. How would you pass a law? What would be the purpose of that law, right?
Well, I don't know.
Surely women
Let's say
have
a law
kids.
around abortion, right? For example. So my sister, I'm an atheist. My sister's very opposed to abortion.
Okay.
That's an issue, right? Where you
Absolutely.
bring your you don't just leave your religion at the door. When you're a member of parliament,
Now we're honing in on
step
something,
into
right?
parliament,
Right.
and you have your laws. There's laws in front of you that are being
Right.
debated. How do you see that kind of impacting?
Right. So we believe Islamically that beyond a certain age, that fetus becomes a child. So it's killing a child. So it's forbidden for us, right? So beyond a certain age. Now there's jurisprudential criteria. For example, if it's before a certain time, and if there is harm that the woman could pass away, or if there's rape or this or that. So we do have a criteria in place to say before a certain time it would be possible to abort a child. Beyond a certain time, no, because that would now be a child, right, as opposed to a fetus. So we have a criteria, an objective criteria, that we're told that beyond the set date it becomes immoral, incorrect to do so. So that would be our view, right? Now, if a woman now in the UK, where it's not a theocracy, right? It's not a Shariah. So then in the UK, I mean, it's not a Shariah,
Well,
so she
let's
would
say
do what she wants,
Sharia,
right?
As far as I understand, Sharia often applies in questions of divorce, right?
No, Sharia
Initiating-
applies in our,
as
in
far
the
as I
life of the whole
understand,
Muslim.
the Sharia courts that exist, they'll often oversee issues about divorce. That's quite a common thing they deal
Yeah,
with.
it's like
right?
civil matters, right?
So, in your view, what do you think the rules around divorce should be? That's another question. Thank you for answering the question about abortion.
Yeah.
Interesting to your view. But what do you think about divorce?
Yeah, so within divorce, if a woman is a Muslim and she is getting married according to the Muslim law, and she wants to get divorced according to the Muslim law, then according to that, she needs a judge that will be able to cater for that in terms of Islamic jurisprudence, which can be catered for by the Muslim courts. But then that's not recognized by the judicial system in the UK, so that's why for that she would need to go to the British courts.
Let's say a Muslim woman in the UK, they decide to get divorced through the legal system that Britain has. You call it British jurisprudence.
The
Is that what you
British
call it?
law, right?
Let's say
Yeah.
they do that. Let's say they sidestep the whole religious command, even though they are religious, they just don't go through that. What do you think the consequences should be for a woman who does that? How should that be treated by Britain, by the Muslim community? I'm interested to know.
You- you're conflating two things. For example, when we're living in a non-Muslim country, what we can do is we could put forward our preferences, and then if those preferences are respected and regarded, then that's fantastic, right? However, if those preferences aren't regarded, for example, once upon a time, there was like a discussion, in fact, not even once upon a time, I think there was a discussion to ban halal meat, right? But then, if halal meat gets banned, Muslims, we will obviously put forward our views, and we will not want, just 1 second. What will happen, it will be terrible, right? And we would have to then come up with an alternative. For example, do we now import halal meat? Do we now we'd have to now adjust according to that new law that's been passed. If we're living in a democracy, if we're living in a democracy, for example, we just had the elections happening, right? So you've got Muslim councillors getting elected, so they can put forward grievances by the Muslim community. You've got Jewish councillors, Christian councillors, etc., etc. So naturally, they want to put forward the Muslim kind of point of view. If that's put forward, if that's respected within a democracy, then, I mean, according to the democracy, then that's fine, right?
If you're an elected representative, though, let's say, aren't you supposed to think about the entire community, not just your background, your people? I know it's hard to ask someone to do that.
No.
Because if I'm coming from my background, I'm going to think, what's good for my background, right?
So as
any background, not just Islam, any group.
So as an elected representative,
you're here to represent the people as a whole, not just your community, right?
No, you wouldn't be representing them as a whole, because as an elected representative, you will have your view as well. Yes, it's ideal and best to be objective. For example, some elected councillors, they have an anti-Palestine view, even though they have, a majority of their people that are pro-Palestinian, yet they will have a view. Right, so then that's an issue now, where people will next time just not elect them. They will just be not elected next time, as we've seen in Birmingham. A lot of Labour seats have been lost. In Lambeth, a lot of Labour seats have been lost. So there's a natural kind of consequence of a democratic system.
I wanted to ask you about, I have a couple of questions.
Have you understood that view?
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from.
I don't think I got a chance to fully
I understood the bulk of what you're saying. I have a couple of questions. The first one was about halal meat, and actually kosher as well. It's the same sort of issue. And the second one I was going to ask about the Green Party, what you think about the Greens. But first of all, I wanted to ask, what would happen if, let's say, a party like, I think Restore Britain is one of these like much further.
Do you want to ask about?
Sorry, mate. Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
Were you going to ask about the halal one first?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So let's say, are you okay, man? Yeah. Sorry. If he got into power, that guy Rupert Lowe, I don't support him personally. I'm on the left actually. I'm not interested in that kind of politics. He wants to ban halal and ban kosher. What will happen to those communities? I'm interested to know.
I mean, because
let's say they won't even allow imported meat.
Because we're living in a
both.
Yeah, you'll be banning both. So because
he wants to ban both, right?
Because we're living in a democratic country, right? So we'll follow the law and we'll try to, sway the decision towards getting kosher and halal unbanned. Just because it's been passed doesn't mean it's going to remain like that. So now people are going to see the consequences on trade, because halal and kosher, it plays, a great economic impact in this country as well. So if enough people see that there's a net negative impact, I'm sure it will be overturned. 1 second.
They might leave.
1 second. So they will be overturned. Now, some people might say, okay, the law in particular was saying that no, ban halal slaughter. It doesn't talk about ban imported meat. So now what's going to be happening is there's going to be a mass import of halal meat, because people have settled in this country, right? So there's going to be an import of meat coming in that's going to be, giving money to other countries or whatnot. Is the government going to be okay with that? So there's going to be knock-on consequences. Or when, for example, I go to Spain or Italy and I'm in a place in which there's a lack of halal meat, I just have vegetarian. When I go to, for example, Sainsbury's, they don't have halal meat.
Adapt.
Yeah, you have to adapt. If you want halal meat and that's a make or break for you, then that person will move to a Muslim country. Simple as that.
Okay, thanks for answering that question. The other question was about the Green Party. So I'm leaning towards a lot of the economic policies. So like UBI, taxing richer people.
Yeah.
But on the social questions, I'm interested because and also I'm opposed to what's happening in Palestine. Like what's the genocide there? For me, it's like a red line. I even told my Labour MB when she visited my house, knocked on my door. She asked me, "Are you going to vote Labour?" And I said, "I can't, because supporting genocide in Gaza it's too much. It's like a red line. You can't cross it."
Respect for that.
But the thing I was going to ask you was, it seems like a strange relationship, right? In the Green Party, they've got very socially liberal young people joining. Quite often, British people, they've left the Labour Party and they've joined the Greens. And they're very much in favour of very liberal, like very, very, very liberal policies. And then obviously, Green Party, they seem to be the only real party opposing the genocide, like in the mainstream. The main party that's like out there championing Gaza and trying to help that issue. How do you think Muslims and like not just Muslims, traditional Christians, traditional Jews, every background, how do you think they're going to adapt to that? It's that kind of conflict, right? Do you see the conflict there, or I want to know your opinion about that?
Yeah. That conflict's always been there. I mean, for example, migrants have traditionally been voting for Labour because of their policies. However, you had Tony Blair that, was involved in killing 1 million. So then that was a bit of an issue. Do you see? And then slowly people are realizing that regardless of, which party comes into power, they're going to be supporting either Israel or the military industrial complex or big pharma or whatever the case may be. So there is that kind of issue now that, okay, who's the lesser of two evils in this case?
Do you think it's something, it's a compromise we need to make?
That's what I'm saying.
If you're a traditional person about social issues, marriage, abortion, whatever, you should compromise and vote for the Greens just because they're dealing with the...
If you're a Muslim living in a non-Muslim country,
what do you think?
Then you can't take traditional stances because it's actually not going to be possible because it's a non-Muslim country that are following non-Muslim rules.
I think right now it is. It might change. So
let me just respond to
in the future,
the genocide
it might change
thing.
Though, what you said.
Let me just respond to the genocide thing. The genocide thing to a lot of people is very immediate, and that's dealing with loss of life in a rapid rate. It's something that's an immediate effect to us all. It's affecting our economy. It's affecting laws being passed. It's affecting silencing of discontent, of free speech, of marches. There's just so much effect, and that's why, because of the immediacy of that, a lot of people are now saying that any party that is now siding with dealing with that immediacy, we're going to be siding with them, and then we're going to be a part of hopefully dialogue and getting them to change their other policies as is part of a democracy,
you can't
right?
Be a purist. You have to be pragmatic and work.
I mean, that's how it is, right?
Yeah.
Even the Green Party has changed and adapted significantly. The Labour Party has, but it's gone towards the other way, right? The Conservative also.
I just wonder how sustainable it is long term. Because let's say in 10 years the Palestine question is more settled. Maybe not, probably not. But let's say it's more settled than now. Then will people start to address a lot of the issues they see with liberalism, how liberal things like the Green Party have become? I'm just curious to know.
Absolutely.
Then they can deal with that later. But priorities, you've got to focus on.
Look, priorities.
On
the one hand,
big.
on the one hand, you've got somebody that's talking about these, liberal kind of issues. On the other hand, you're seeing a child with no limbs, and the parents are, completely wiped off from this planet. Over here, you can't say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, or you can't be an old man talking about or challenging the government's stance on what's that party? Palestine Action. I mean, it's ridiculous. So people think that is more immediate. Now, there's a debate, but here people are saying this is more immediate, and this is what we need to be dealing with so far.
Thank you for answering my question. Last question I had, you mentioned free speech and around. I have a friend of mine who's very Christian, and he thinks there should be laws against blaspheming against Christianity. I wanted to know what your thoughts are on, because something I've noticed is that, if your religion is very important to you, it's like the foundation of everything.
Yeah.
Even I'm saying this as an atheist, I completely understand why someone would oppose free speech in making fun of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, whatever it is. What are your views on that? I don't want to assume maybe you have different views. I don't know.
Yeah, I believe freedom of speech in countries like this to be very relative. It depends who's setting the discourse, who's doing the funding, who's, for example, influencing the people in power. I think it's completely and utterly relative. I don't think that there is a standard that gets applied consistently. For example, Kanye West was banned in this country because of his views on anti-Semitism. Then on the other hand, Valentina Gomez initially was actually allowed in this country. And then later on was she banned. And there's many issues. We've got individuals coming to the park holding opinions, and now they're under house arrest and they're constantly being. Do you see?
Yeah, it's true.
And that's because there's a conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And because of that, I mean, there's a lot of dialogue that needs to have.
Coming at it from a left-wing point of view, I wonder if it's coming back to bite us, because in the 2010s, there was a lot of remember university cancel culture?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of cancelling. So you might have a Zionist speaker coming to give a speech about Zionism, or they may not even be speaking about Israel, but they have Zionist views. And a lot of the university students would come out and cancel. They would get that person cancelled. They wouldn't be able to speak there. Now it's kind of coming back to bite us. So many of people in America, students have come out to support Palestine, and they're getting their camps shut down.
Yeah.
And it's I can't help but feel we've been a bit. You have to work both ways. You can't just shut down one side of the debate. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying you do this, but I've noticed a lot of people do this, where they kind of agree with free speech as long as it's within the boundaries that they.
So here's now
I'm
the
saying
thing.
this as someone. I'm not a fan of Zionism at all, but I think someone should get the right to speak.
So
get up and speak.
When someone says freedom of speech, right? So where is this freedom of speech coming from? Is it coming from a backdrop of liberalism? And when you're talking about liberalism, what are you talking about? Kant's categorical imperative? One second. Utilitarianism. But if you're asking a Muslim this, a Muslim's not going to be coming from the backdrop of Kant's categorical imperative. If you're asking a Muslim from the backdrop of his moral frame view, the frame view of Islam, their moral frame view is going to be based upon Islam. And according to our moral frame of view,
I know what you mean,
according to us, you can't insult Jesus. So if you're living in a Sharia compliant country, you can't go out and start swearing at Jesus or swearing at Muhammad or swearing at Moses.
You have in America, for example.
Yeah, so our free speech, just like over here, free speech, this was what I was thinking. So the limits of free speech, whenever they're discussed, the limit is always, if something incurs harm, referring to the harm principle. But now, what in the discourse, how do we define harm? Just one second.
How would you define it? Because I wanted to give you a definition of that.
So the way people define harm is, some people will say, physical harm. However, now it's actually referring to, it could be, there's a psychological harm, or even spiritual harm as well. So this term of harm or trauma, physical trauma, mental trauma, spiritual trauma, it's being fleshed out to such a degree that I remember, I think this was about 6 months ago, when a decision was reached about allowing certain rhetoric about trans. The trans community was saying this is it's hate speech, because it's actually it's harm. It's causing harm to us. That speech is actually
like psychological harm.
But they were saying that they were putting in the category of harm. So this is why I'm saying that harm, I mean, how do we define harm? And who gets to set the standard for harm?
I think if it's an imminent threat, then that's one thing. So I kind of agree with the idea that in America, for example, my understanding is quite limited. I'm not a lawyer, or I don't understand the Constitution inside out there, but let's say, for example, there's an armed robbery happening, someone with a gun in America, they go into a shop, two guys, one of them has the gun and he's pointing at the shopkeeper's head, and the other guy says, pull the trigger. That's the only kind of speech that's banned in America, from what I understand, because it's imminent threat to life. You're not allowed to say pull the trigger, because it's literally imminent threat to life happening in this situation. However, in America, generally, their freedom of speech is quite substantial. You can come out and you can criticize any religion, make fun of any political belief, say what you like. Generally, unless you're at a university, it's a closed environment, you might get deplatformed if you're you might be pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. For whatever reason, you might get cancelled. But generally, there seems to be quite, I would say, higher than in Europe, Western Europe. You can generally publish books.
So Edward Snowden, who was a whistleblower, right? He didn't give anybody physical harm. There was no immediate threat. However, the amount of words that were thrown at him, hey, there's treason, there's this, is this, is that.
For his life. I think they got him on the Espionage Act. That was a different. So it wasn't because Edward Snowden came out.
So then there's a footnote.
By the way, what he did was great to whistleblow, and like Julian Assange.
But there's a footnote to freedom of speech, right?
That's not freedom.
If it is harmful to the state.
That's a tricky one. I mean, that's like freedom of publishing as well. He's publishing leaks.
See?
So I think there should be more freedom of publishing than there is in America. But I give you that example. Generally, there's a lot more freedom of speech there.
No, but even if you're looking on campuses, people even saying from the river to the sea, it's enough for you to get locked up.
Yeah, it's true. Even
Sami
here, right?
Hamdi went from the UK there, and what he said is actually he was acquitted, but they kept him locked up for 2 weeks, and they were saying that you actually shouldn't be locked up, and you could be locked up, for months on end.
Yeah.
I know people, my friends that go there, and they were saying to me as well that if you go, once you get put up to an ESTA, you're gonna be questioned, and you should be you need to show them your social media. My question is that if there's so much freedom of speech, why does what I'm gonna post on social media your problem? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Like, how is that an issue? Like over here with Keir Starmer, people have had it up to here with him because people are getting knocks on the door because of a tweet that they posted.
Do you think that should be? Because some of those tweets. All right, I'm gonna do one last question.
Yeah.
I have to go. But I enjoyed the discussion.
No, so did I.
The devil's advocate would say, well, some of those tweets were saying, oh, we should go burn down mosques. Remember that during the Southport riots?
Yeah.
Maybe those kind of tweets. I kind of understand. I don't like Keir Starmer, but in his defense, I can get why you would send the police to that person's house. Now, should they get like 6 months in prison? Maybe that's too much. I don't know. I'm not sure.
But there's now the question, right?
I would say America's system of free speech is better. I would say it's more open.
But would you prefer this country have more free speech?
I think we could do with more free speech in the UK. I think there is a sense in which you kind of, in many environments, whether it's at work or
have you heard of the Canary Mission? Canary Mission.
I haven't heard of that. No.
It's a platform. Basically, if anyone's pro-Palestine, people do a deep dive into that person's social media, business, like personal life.
Like try and dox them and destroy them.
And they'll literally, there's a website where they go and post their date of birth.
Yeah, it's horrible, man.
Even
people lose their jobs.
Even if you look at the Patriot Act, there's overlaps when it comes to prevent here in the UK.
They don't come to Speaker's Corner because I know what you're doing here. You're trying to promote a channel, so I understand it. I'm not afraid of my views. I think my views are quite normal views, and I think we've had a very respectful conversation. I know we might disagree on some specifics. But I know a lot of people, they're scared to come because they don't want their employer to see, or whoever, they don't want to get...
There's real life consequences,
they might have
right?
that. You might just get doxxed. Or they might put your address on there and you might have thugs come around to us.
People's families, children, everything just posted online.
Also a lot of people would argue that if you actually look at the influence AIPAC is having, it's become a meme now. Sean Strickland just won yesterday, and his nose was kind of kicked in or whatnot, and he made a joke that he's like, oh, it's making me look like someone from AIPAC.
Yeah.
So like Tucker Carlson and these guys, Candace Owens, it's become a meme.
Right, people lose all their jobs.
It's become a meme how much influence AIPAC is now having on Congress people to such a degree that America seems to be very restrictive as to what it can say, what it can do against Israel. In fact, you get punished for speaking against Israel more so than punished against speaking against something to do with America.
It seems to be loosening and changing, though. There are some younger politicians coming up in America that are they're more willing to come out and criticize AIPAC and like those lobbies. They're able to do that.
Let me give you an example of Jimmy Kimmel.
I think that's slowly changing. And even now, I saw a really strange poll. Found majority of young American men in the Republican Party. This is not like the left. This is like very traditionalist guys. They oppose the alliance with Israel. That's the majority. So you're going to see, I think, in the next generation, they're going to come out. A lot of young Americans are just something.
There was this YouTuber. Remind me of his name. He went to like a town, a Jewish town, and he was filming there.
That guy he's lost his platform. Right?
He did it against.
He's been deplatformed.
So he did it against Somalians. He had no issue. He did it against Christians. He had no issue. Did it against Muslims. He had no issue. Against Pakistanis, he had no issue. As soon as he did it against Jews, then something Oliver maybe.
Tyler
Oliveira.
Tyler
Oliveira. He said my Patreon got taken down. My this got taken down. I've been this. All of my sponsors have pulled out. And even the platform, or rather the documentary that he did, he was saying a lot of things that were very problematic with the people that he was speaking to. Like, why do you have access to the Congress people and the president? And these were very kind of senior figures within that community, and how non-Jews were feeling within those areas, but merely even discussing those ideas was enough for him to be deplatformed, for his things to be shut down. Dan Bilzerian, you mentioned him, he's been deplatformed as well. Sneeko has been deplatformed. Yeah, and there's many other people that have been deplatformed. But it's very strange for a country that claims that only if someone's holding a trigger and somebody tells him to shoot, that's the only time. Why is it that people are being deplatformed and their livelihoods are being taken away?
They are private companies, right? So Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, at the end of the day, these are not public services. This is a public service, right? Speaker's Corner is like, it's managed by the police, it's managed by the state, it's part of royal parks. I mean, maybe technically the land belongs to the king. I don't know. I'm not sure the land ownership how it works, but we can all come here. We used to be able to pray here if you're Muslim as well. They've changed the rules now around that, but it was pretty free. But Facebook and Twitter and even like Telegram, a lot of these are private companies.
There's government overlaps here, because
there is government overlap.
I'll give you just one case in point.
I'm just pointing out that with free speech, generally it's not associated with private spaces. If you come into my house, I might disagree with everything you say and ask you to leave. You would never say, "Oh, he's violating my free speech," because you're in my private space, right? That's what at the end of the day, Facebook's a private company. If they want to kick you off for being anti-Zionist or pro-Palestine, or it could be even anti-Palestine, whatever it is, in a way they have that right.
But if we look at these private companies and how they are in these,
we don't have power.
If we look at these private companies, they function differently in these different countries. For example, TikTok will function differently in India to America, to the UK. Let's just take the American case study. TikTok in America, the only condition for it to continue running and functioning was that it needed new owners, and the only way for it to get new owners was if they were green-lighted by the American government. The ones that they green-lighted, one of them was Larry Ellison, and Larry Ellison is somebody that is literally shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu. He's a threat to American security, frankly, but the fact that he's been greenlit by the American government there's a big question mark there.
And he's the same guy that owns Oracle.
It's a whole network.
He wants to integrate the NHS and all of our personal information into Oracle.
NHS is actually owned by nice systems.
We should have a choice. I should have a choice where my personal
this is where I think,
goes.
sadly,
I disagree with someone.
Sadly, I don't think religion has many answers here, unfortunately. Whether it's Christianity, Islam, it doesn't matter. Because we really need radical democracy, like direct democracy. I think the people need to have power. Sadly, there's no religion I can see that promotes that. That doesn't mean they're against it, but we need to have real democratic people's control over social media, even just over government. It's not enough that I can elect a representative and they can do whatever they want. They need to be directly. They need to be accountable.
But with respect, I don't think democracy has been accepted by even the greatest philosophers here in the West. For example, Plato, Nietzsche, and these individuals, they held the view that to give, nobody's the ability or the power to vote for integral issues when they have no knowledge is actually not sensible.
Yeah, they were elitists.
They were elitists. So now here's the question, that if we actually look at how it's actually taken place, what Hitler did was completely legal. What so-and-so did in these countries were completely legal. They were democratically elected. Muhammad Mossadegh was democratically elected. However, that democracy...
That's not, for me, real democracy. Real democracy is not just when you elect someone into power. It's when the people make the policies. And they hold
the people are voting for reform now. The people are voting for reform now.
They are not deciding the policies, right? So, for example, I believe in a philosophy that Murray Bookchin, a famous political philosopher in America, spoke about, which was direct democracy at the local level. You directly deciding in local assemblies, face to face, what kind of policies you want to see. I think that's real democracy. It's not when you elect whoever, Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage, Tony Blair, whoever. They're not really going to follow your interests. They may have used you to get into power, but once they're in power, it's not that different.
Do you believe real democracy exists when, for example, the people that even have a chance to make it into parliament, the only way they can get into parliament is by holding hands with Big Pharma, the military industrial.
Yeah, I hate the lobbying.
No, you can be against it, but to now separate that from democracy, it just doesn't work.
No, I think you should ban. I think big corporate lobbying from like tobacco, alcohol, fast foods.
Do you see that happening?
Or even foreign countries.
Do you see that happening?
I don't think America should be allowed, like big American companies should be allowed to dominate British
But
politics.
do you see that happening,
Or
though?
same with like, Israel or Iran or wherever. It doesn't matter which country. It does. Unfortunately, it does happen. That, to be fair, that can happen in any system.
No, what
that
I'm
can
saying
even
is,
happen
do you
under the
see?
system I spoke about.
Do you see
any
it
system can have lobbying.
practically people banning lobbying?
It might happen slowly and gradually. Look. Remember cigarettes, right? Cigarettes. The tobacco lobby in the UK was very powerful, right? They delayed legislation against cigarettes for years and years, decades, probably costing millions of lives. Actually, millions of people dying, right, from smoking cigarettes. And yet, finally, we managed to control the tobacco lobby, right? More or less now, you go into a corner shop, you can't just see all the packaging out there. It's hidden behind a cupboard, right? There's certain rules that we have in place. I think real democracy would mean getting rid of a lot of the power that these big companies have, whether it's social media or the foreign government, whatever it is. I want to ask, I promise you, one last question.
Yeah.
All right. There's a guy who's been very controversial. Sorry to change the subject. I just have to ask before I go. There's a guy
I was
who's
hoping
been...
to talk a bit about morality before you left as well, to see your kind of moral framework, because remember you wanted to unpack the harm principle a bit, and because...
I think too much is made of avoiding harm. I think harm is an inevitable
right?
part of growth. So I've been harmed mentally by coming to Speaker's Corner. Mentally, it is quite harmful to hear ideas you disagree with, and you might find it quite insulting, but it does help you grow. So in that way, I'm not one of these people who, like, when I take my kid to the playground, I don't want the kid to play on any of the because I want them to, they might get hurt. Maybe the kid falls off the slide and they bump their knee and they get a bruise. It's fine, you know. We shouldn't just avoid all harm.
How do you decide right and wrong?
But I agree, we should avoid people getting insulted in the work, especially in the workplace. You need respect for your colleagues. You need to be getting along. There's so many different cultures and backgrounds in the UK. If you allow people just to be insulting to each other at work,
how do you decide what's right or wrong?
You need to have people working together, and they need to be respectful. So there needs to be laws in the workplace. And I would even say in public, basic decency about, you can't go up to people in their face and be like hateful. I don't think that's right.
How do you determine right and wrong?
Well, for me, I think human beings instinctively have a sense of right and wrong. I think it's biologically hardwired. We are a very social animal. And I think there is an instinctive desire. Do you know, for example, every single culture doesn't like criminality. There's not a single culture on the planet which majority, they condone criminality. That's a normal thing that humans have. Whether you're atheist, Christian, Islam, or whatever, criminality is seen as like bad. So I think there's something innate, whether you're religious or not. See, I'm an atheist.
I don't
but
believe
I think you
it.
can trust me that I have a basic level of morality to engage with you in a respectful way and not try and harm you. And I can go to work and be a normal citizen, pay my taxes, work hard, contribute, keep London like, you know, a safe place, right? Even though I'm an atheist.
But the thing is that if it was so innate, we wouldn't need, for example, traffic lights, right? We wouldn't need CCTVs. We wouldn't need police enforcement if things were so innate, right? The fact is that things aren't innate. That's why London is one of the most policed cities in the world, right? And that's why, cities that aren't policed. And if it was so innate, there wouldn't be such a demarcation on what is a baby and if we can kill babies or not, abortion,
this,
this,
that,
that.
purely biology. There's a social aspect too. Let's look. Throughout history, there have been loads of different groups, civilizations. They've come up and they've fallen, they collapse, they come and new ones grow. Generally, the ones that succeed and they fight and they succeed in beating the other ones, they're the ones who work together more. They have like, I think there's a phrase in Arabic, asabaya. It's this phrase, I don't know, I think it's called asabaya. The idea of solidarity among the group. There's that sort of highest, if there's a high level of trust and community, respect for property, respect for each other's rights, you're going to have a more successful group. They're going to survive the struggle against, do you see what I mean?
That's more referring to nationalism. We actually,
not just nationalism, it's almost like just.
But we believe in something called ukhuwa. Yeah, ukhuwa, brotherhood or ummah. Yeah, which is.
This is why. Can I tell you, all the CCTV and all the police in the world, it would not be able to stop London if London went into civil war. This is what I was going to ask you about. There's this philosopher David Betts, who spoke with. He's been on the rounds, giving interviews, and he's predicting in the next few years, across the Western world, there's going to be some sort of civil war, and he kind of sees it as like. To put it really simply, you'd have a state, you'd have Muslims, and you'd have, like, say, non-Muslim population. And he's very worried, and he wants to avoid that outcome. I want to avoid that too. I think everybody here at Speaker's Corner wants to avoid that, but he's very worried it's going to pan out that way because there's so much cultural, what he sees is like cultural conflict. That's how he views it. And I just want to know what your thoughts are on that before I go. I wanted to get your opinion.
Be more specific.
Because even like Five Pillars, the podcaster,
Yeah.
he's been speaking a lot about it as well. And he's been commenting
About like
about the threat of the idea that potentially there might be some sort of civil conflict. It doesn't matter how much CCTV you have. Look at
What's going to cause that? What's going to possibly cause
I don't know.
that? And how can it be prevented?
I actually don't know. The long-term trends, there's a lot of factors. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would say if you follow the money trail, there's a lot of Zionist influence. For example, Robert Shillman, who just gave $100,000 to Tommy Robinson.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
a lot of money.
it's the first time he's admitted it himself. Yeah. Whilst before we know he's been getting funding from Middle Eastern Forum, Rebel Media, linked again to Robert Shillman, and all of these
He's very
guys.
pro-Israel, Tommy Robinson, right?
Yeah, he's.
Yeah, I saw him speaking here in 2017. I think he came here with his mob and they attacked me. They started kicking me.
Yeah.
You know, they were like a horrible bunch of people. I can't say I
And
support
because
them.
of that, the question needs to arise, like the brother was saying, that why is this kind of coming? Because we know the whole divide and conquer, otherizing. Migrants have always been there, will always be there. You can't just take all migrants out. But the fact that migrants...
I'm a migrant myself. I don't want to be kicked out.
From?
I think
I'm not from the UK originally.
Where you from?
Country is built on migrants.
My ancestors are all English, Irish, or whatever, but I'm not.
It's unbelievable.
So I have a huge respect for migrant rights. I want that to be.
I actually think everyone's responsible, in my opinion, to this possible civil war or something.
It might happen.
Because
Though. I just worry that
the
it's
Muslim,
going to be.
the Muslim community tends to keep to themselves, the Christian community tends to keep to themselves, the Jewish, they all keep themselves, and the atheists to themselves. Whereas like, I'm a Muslim, my father and mother are atheists. They don't know any Muslims except me.
There's a huge number of British people that don't talk to anybody of a different race. They don't talk. They don't.
It does, yeah.
And there needs to be more people going out and talking like this, but on a larger scale, so
London,
we
you
can
kinda have
understand
to.
what we have in common.
But migrants will always be scapegoated. I mean,
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
happened before. At the
terrible,
time
yeah.
of Nick Griffin and his BNP, then you had UKIP.
You know, Nick Griffin's pro-Palestine. Have you seen that?
He is now.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's a weird world we're living in now. Yeah.
He was saying that when he
Strange.
was approached, he was told stay away from the banks. That was one of the things, and stay away. I think it was from the whole Israel, the Israel Jewish thing. And he was actually saying the fact that I was told to stay away from these entities is a big question mark.
I really enjoyed our discussion. I've got to go.
Thank you, brother.
I had a really good time texting. I
No, likewise. I think there's.
Maybe see you next time.
Inshallah.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
one.
brother.
Take care.
Take it easy.